You arrived in Italy in October of last year. How much time did you try to figure out Italian politics, or does it have a life of their own? You kind of never know where it falls next.
So I actually determined before I came here that I would never figure it out. So I didn't spend a lot of time trying to figure out Italian politics. What I knew was that the will of the Italian people would be served at the end because they would go to the polls.
Ambassador, what does it mean for the recovery of this country?
For the recovery of this country? The country will continue. You know, so one of the ministers here in Italy told me when I arrived and I was going through my meetings that much like the United States, which was on a recovery, things sometimes don't go well and then they do. But by and large, the United States and Italy, they both keep moving up. So I presume that will continue.
Ambassador, do you expect to get President Trump on the phone later? Does he call and he says, Ambassador, what is going on in Italy? Brief me.
Actually, when the president calls, it's always much briefer than that.
What will you tell him about what happened yesterday?
I don't think he'd be surprised, really, on what happened. It's pretty much of the continuation of what's happened around Europe. What distinguishes, I think, the outcome here, to a large extent, is that there is a president in office, President Mattarella, who will likely have a strong say in the outcome, or at least a strong input into the outcome. And he is a very highly respected, very thoughtful presence in this. And I think that will be meaningful in the outcome.
Steve Bannon weighed in on the Italian elections. What does that tell you about the right, the Italian right, and its closeness to the American right?
Well, Steve probably has an advantage of being more Italian than I am. So I couldn't really tell you exactly what his input is, but it's always significant.
Ambassador, how many questions are you expecting from American businessmen wanting to invest in this country over the next couple of days and weeks?
So I recently came from Florence, where we had a USA Select conference, and we had 17 states representing 50% of American business, all coming to Florence to talk about how to do business in Italy. We're both on an upward curve. It increased about our exports from the United States to Italy increased last year, our imports increased, and direct investment increased in both. That'll continue.
It will continue. How many questions do you get from the Italian side on actually what President Trump is doing with, possible protectionist measures like tariffs?
So this is a relatively new development, as you know, and we have a quite a meaningful deficit that we run with countries. We have a big one with Italy. We have about an $18 billion deficit. Or to put it in better terms, Italy has enjoyed a very significant surplus for a long period of time. And the tax and tariff will have some minimal effect, but I don't think it will change the rapid growth that we have in both our imports and exports to each other.
Ambassador, we cover, of course, private equity day in, day out. You come from the world of private equity. How different is private equity to the role of ambassador?
That's a really pressing question. The role of private equity is not that dissimilar because you're basically faced with evaluating decisions, the pros and the cons of making a move. And the same thing is done here every day. And it will be done again today and tomorrow. There are more similarities than differences.
Are there also a lot more similarities with the rise of populism? We saw it with Brexit. We saw it here in the elections yesterday. We saw it with the appointment of President Trump. Is this a cycle? How do you explain this kind of phenomenon? And are the three linked?
Well, the answer is I don't know how to fully explain it, but I do know that it's happening all around Europe. And as it did in the United States. Sometimes after long periods of time, some change is good. So we think we'll have to wait to measure it, but I'm optimistic.
Ambassador, what is the number one question that you get from U.S. companies wanting to do business in Europe, in Italy? Do they need better labor laws? Do they need more flexible working force? What do they need?
Well, the answer is sort of yes to both of those, particularly in some of the laws of taxation. They have made some positive changes in bringing business to Italy in that regard, taxation and some of the laws that surround it. Regulation has to be diminished to bring in more business. And I think moves in that direction will be positive. The global economy is on an upward curve, and Italy is enjoying some of that too. I think they moved to 1.5%, and they dropped their deficit to GDP. I have every reason to believe that curve will continue. I think whoever's in government will want to try and make sure that continues.
Ambassador, we're just getting some breaking news, so I just want to bring those to our radio listeners and our TV watchers. We did hear from ANSA, which is the Italian news agency, usually quite reliable on these things, saying that Matteo Renzi has resigned as head of the Partito Democratico. We now understand actually from a spokesperson saying that that's not happened. He's denied the fact that Mr. Renzi has resigned. Do you expect much more investment coming from the U.S.?
What I really find fascinating is the amount of fake news that comes on a repeated basis. So, but to answer your question directly, I think there is a trend in place, and it will continue for a while. If it's successful, it will continue for a longer period of time. I think it remains to be seen.
On fake news, I mean, how do you tackle that? Again, the fact that Matteo Renzi resigned, maybe it was a source, it's difficult to actually pinpoint sometimes. And he may have resigned and the spokesperson doesn't know.
So, I think our president was one of the first to really point out and pound on the fact that there's a lot of fake news out there. And I think what happens is really good reporters who are very careful, like you, will diminish the impact of fake news. And there are different ways to approach it. And we'll just have to move it to one side. Italy's aggressive in trying to delineate and fight fake news.
I mean, is it only, business channels that can actually, I guess, because they're a step removed from the politics, explain things in a more level-headed way?
Well, you're kind to say that business says things in a level-headed way. So it's the first time I've heard that sort of taken as a personal accolade. But I just think fake news is being more discernible now. People are more aware of the fact they check the sources and the news.
Ambassador, we talked a lot about some of the reforms needed. We talked about the economy in Italy. Do you think the vote yesterday was linked to immigration? Is this something that you've heard over the last 6 months when you became ambassador to Rome?
So, immigration is a significant problem. Very much so to Italy, obviously. And I think it has been handled both effectively and with great humanity by Italy. It's sort of a beacon to the world at the moment. So I hope it continues to be handled in the same humane and careful way.
We had a lot of chief executive, former chief executive, present chief executive sitting in your very chair saying the Chinese are looking to buy a lot of assets in Italy. Do you see appetite from non-U.S. countries wanting to come in and buy Italian assets?
Well, we've seen some fairly significant activity take place. And Italy is a very attractive place. It's got extremely intelligent people who have been very innovative in business and make it very attractive for other countries and other people to want to come in and participate. Now, I think Italy is going to have to continue to be discerning as to whom they sell major parts of their industry to. And I think that will happen also.
But if they don't have a government for a very long time, does it mean that actually they'll be a lot more lax on who they sell some of the assets to?
I doubt that. I think, the government that's in place is going to continue to govern. It's another beauty of the way Italy is set up constitutionally. So they'll be in place governing, and I don't expect anything rash to happen. There's steady hands on the wheel still.